Hi, and welcome to Power Play. I'm Mike LeCouteur. Tonight, negotiations in the new year.
But we want to make sure that our trade relationship remains trust. It's a beneficial relationship. We understand that.
You can't unscramble an egg that's been around for generations. You have to make the omelet larger.
Prime Minister Mark Carney says formal trade discussions with the U.S. will start in January. It's the first step in the review of CUSMA. That is the free trade agreement that also includes Mexico. So what's the future for the deal and what could it mean for the Canadian economy? We'll ask two people who have intimate knowledge of the file. Then, on this final edition of Power Play for 2025, we have a special, not-so-secret Santa version of our Friday front bench. Sabrina Grover, Melanie Paradis, Carl Boulanger, and Rachel Aiello are all here, and they'll look back at 2025 and ahead to 2026. Plus, we'll see who they're giving gifts to and who might find a lump of coal in their stockings this year. They'll be here in minutes. First, though,
The ironic thing is, folks, I talked to both Democrat and Republicans. I have yet to meet a Republican that agrees with President Trump's strategy of going after his closest friends and allies. This does not work. You can't unscramble an egg that's been around for generations. You have to make the omelet larger, and everyone's going to benefit. There'll be more jobs, more security, and both countries are going to thrive like they've never seen before.
Ontario Premier Doug Ford in Buffalo, New York today, inking a deal with that state's Governor Kathy Hochul. The goal is to advance the development of nuclear power. Now, the two leaders also affirmed the cross-border partnership despite the trade difficulties at the highest levels in each country. Let's get a little refresher on how we got here. On February 1st, U.S. President Donald Trump imposed tariffs on Canada and ignited a trade war. The relationship became even more tense after Premier Ford ran an anti-tariff ad that led Trump to terminate all trade negotiations. Now, Prime Minister Carney has been in touch with Trump, but that's where things currently stand. We know CUSMA is up for review in 2026, and the Prime Minister has announced that his minister responsible for Canada-U.S. trade, Dominic LeBlanc, will head to Washington in mid-January to launch formal talks with his American counterparts. That comes as the U.S. Trade Representative laid out a list of concerns that they have with certain Canadian policies, notably on dairy products, alcohol, and digital services. So what's at stake for the Canadian economy during next year's CUSMA review? Joining me now are two people who have been deeply involved in the Canada-U.S. relations for years now. Flavio Volpe is the president of the Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association, and Diamond Isinger is a former advisor to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau on Canada-U.S. relations. Thank you both for joining us. Diamond, I want to start with you. Now, this government has really tried to downplay how significant each meeting is, even those conversations between Trump and Carney, even though the PMO is now calling this a launch of formal discussions. In your opinion, how significant is this?
I think it's great that we're going to see Minister LeBlanc headed to Washington, in part because he can have far more practical working level conversations, hopefully without the same scrutiny or stakes that come with leader level interactions. There was recently, of course, the FIFA interactions on the sideline of that draw. There have been other opportunities where the two countries have been speaking together. But for Minister LeBlanc to head down to Washington will be helpful in the same calendar year, in 2026, as this CUSMA review deadline, to really set the understanding of what Canada hopes to get, now complemented with the fact that the U.S. has put out there what they consider these must-haves out of a deal, although I would take those as well with a bit of a grain of salt.
We'll come back to that in just a second. With Flavio, the auto industry has been in limbo for months now with this trade war that continues to linger. Do you feel like this announcement of a trip down to the U.S. is kind of like a Christmas gift that you've been waiting for?
Well, I think it's very important to see that Howard Lutnick, who's responsible for these sectoral tariffs, these 232 tariffs, and Jameson Greer, who's the USTR ambassador, who's responsible for the CUSMA review, see their Canadian counterpart in person. This isn't sideline meetings, some whispers between provincial trade reps and somebody in some office. These are the chief negotiators talking to each other, setting the tone, getting an understanding of where everybody is For us in automotive, the bad news that we had predicted through the year that we were going to have difficulty with a major plant in Brampton and in Ingersoll has come true. But we are also at a point where we think we've had encouraging connections with USTR. We spoke at the hearings in Washington early this month, and then met with the key people at Commerce. They're starting to understand the math, and it's starting to bake in the U.S. And Dominic LeBlanc showing up immediately at the beginning of the year, and certainly with knowledge of the White House and with the blessing from the Prime Minister is really important.
Flavio, give viewers an idea. What is your evidence that it is starting to sink in with U.S. lawmakers down there that this is hurting them?
Well, you heard the Premier of Ontario say he talks to Democrats and Republicans. We do too, in Congress, in the House, in the Senate. We speak to senior officials, elected and unofficial, elected and unelected in the executive branch, and we're starting to have different types of discussions. There was 1,700 submissions to USTR for this USMCA review, and they invited 149 speakers. We were the only Canadian industrial sector invited. That's them wanting to hear from me representing automotive. That's not an accident. And when we sat down that day, we talked about the math being, hey, by the way, you're hurting General Motors, Stellantis, and Ford. Here, they're Canadian operations, but they're American companies. But they buy, together with Toyota and Honda, $29 billion a year of auto parts from U.S. factories, and you're hurting yourself. How can we get to a place where we stop doing that to each other? There's a lot of interest in the data, in the math, and in preparing that scenario for decision makers like Secretary Lutnick and Ambassador Greer. That's new. That has not been my experience in Washington over the last 6 to 9 months.
Diamond, we were talking a little earlier about U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer presenting that list of outstanding issues to Congress that you said we should kind of take with a grain of salt. The fact that it includes dairy market access, and the Online Streaming Act. Do you think that these are just bargaining chips that they're putting on the table, or are these going to be the hills that they want to die on?
Every single piece of information that comes out from the U.S. should be perceived as a bargaining chip. We are in a negotiation, whether one has officially commenced yet or not. This is all a tactical series of actions to determine how they can best position themselves vis-a-vis Canada and also Mexico. What I'd say, though, too, is a number of the items on that list, or sort of manifesto of things that the U.S. hopes to achieve, are ironically things that have only come about by virtue of the trade instability and actions taken by the United States. For example, their frustration, rightly, the economic impact of Canadian boycotts of American liquor products, not stocking them in certain provinces, that has exclusively happened because of the circumstances of the actions that the Trump White House has taken. So some of those pieces may actually be easier to resolve, at least from a policy perspective, to have provinces agree to lift those in the event that we get to a reviewed CUSMA that we can move forward with. Others will be harder, and I think the more enduring piece that's going to be challenging for the U.S. to contend with is going to be the radical shift that's taken place just in public opinion in Canada and sentiment. It's one thing for example, a provincial government to agree to stock American liquor again. It's another to convince Canadian consumers that they should be purchasing those items, especially as we try to encourage so many Canadians to buy more closer to home. So it should be an interesting time to see which of those items actually make it to a final reviewed CUSMA, which of those actually end up being lines in the sand, or which are up for negotiation as we enter this process in 2026.
Diamond, do you think that's the biggest difference from the last negotiation and the last time Canada, and specifically the Trump administration, were trying to negotiate and hammer out a deal? Do you think that sort of Canadian sentiment and the buy Canadian sentiment is one of the bigger factors here?
I think it is, although you have sort of firm concepts of protectionism in markets like Canada and the US, in the sense of policy that is made to specifically do business within those countries. You also then have that public sentiment of the desire to support local, to buy local, to support our own economies to the best of our ability. You see that from the US as well. They do a lot of their own Buy America measures when it comes to their procurement, but also in terms of encouraging individuals to make consumer choices about where they're spending their money. That is going to be a challenging shift. And I think despite the fact that some of the goodwill has shifted a bit, perhaps for the worse in this last year on the Canadian side, I do still think most Canadians understand the imperative of continuing to do business with the United States. We can express the wish all we wish to, that we would like to do business more with people around the world, with ourselves, in and amongst provinces within Canada, but the US is and will continue to be a major partner for Canada. So I think your average Canadian is pretty pragmatic about this in wanting the Carney government to get to a renewed agreement, so we have that clarity moving forward for sectors like Flavio's.
Flavio, you're one of the members of the Prime Minister's Council on Canada-U.S. Relations, and I remember having a conversation with Arlene Dickinson, who said in the last time they did this, there was really a Team Canada effort in this trade war. Do you feel like that's still the case? Do you feel like all members of civil society, not only industry, but also unions, do you think that they're at the table and helping with this behind the Carney government right now, or do you think the Carney government is bringing them to the table enough?
Well, I think when we set up that Canada-U.S. Council, and I look at Diamond, who helped bring together the right balance of people from across the country and then helped to coordinate that effort, we were under some really extreme new pressure, new rhetoric, new attacks, new use of national security and emergency powers by the White House. And I thought it struck a really good balance of people who could bring insight to the table and then fan out across the country and use their network and influence to help bring Canadians to where they needed to be, or at least help direct and redirect a little bit of the shifting winds. The government has changed through the year, and Mark Carney brings a different approach. He brings a different skill set, a different background. I know that he still relies on advice from outside of his office and his inner circle, but he's conducting it in a different manner. We saw Justin Trudeau. I think if we did a year in review here, what was the most poignant Canadian moment in this trade war was Justin Trudeau on the night, I think, of February 1st with his "We'll fight him on the beaches" speech. I think kind of rallied Canadians to just how important it was to get aligned in a moment where we all needed to work together. What Mark Carney has inherited and has seen is, at that time, the president was picking on Canada, Mexico, and China. In the ensuing months, he's picked on the entire planet and in domestic affairs, and it's set 1,000 other fires. And so what we've seen a prime minister do here, I think, is tighten that circle, tighten the message, and he's seen where he has conceded points. The famous threat of doubling our tariffs if we didn't get rid of the digital services tax, that you can't rely on the White House to reciprocate. And so we're in a different moment in the same tariff war. I'm excited about where we are. No, I'm satisfied with where we are, but the proof is in the pudding. There's industrial Canada, steel, aluminum, automotive, lumber is carrying the weight of this trade war, and we do need to find relief. And we're counting on the Prime Minister and his team, including an incoming ambassador, to find a way to get to a table without making concessions along the way there that would hurt industrial Canada or others.
Okay. Unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. I do appreciate the conversation. Flavio Volpe and Diamond Inzinger, thank you so much for being with us. We really appreciate this. Still to come on Power Play, it's the Friday Front Bench, and it's the one that you've waited all year for. What are the top political moments of 2025? What were they, and what are their bold predictions for 2026? Sabrina Grover, Melanie Paradzi, Carl Belanger, and Rachel Aiello. They're all standing by, and they'll be right here after this.
Justin Trudeau. Nice guy. I think he's a very good guy. I call him Governor Trudeau.
I cannot be the one to carry the Liberal standard into the next election.
What I'd like to see, Canada become our 51st state.
Who's ready to stand up for Canada with me? America wants our land, our resources, our water, our country. Never.
Look, this has got to be the biggest political gathering of the 21st century.
Have you maybe reflected on your leadership style moving forward?
No.
Next question, I'm sorry.
Who cares?
What a year it has been. 2025 began with Justin Trudeau as Prime Minister, but his resignation on January 6th triggered a political reset in this country that few expected. Now, at the time, the Liberals were trailing the Conservatives in public opinion polling by more than 20 points. But then Mark Carney became Liberal leader, and he went into the federal election campaign pitching himself as the best leader to take on U.S. President Donald Trump. The Liberals won a minority, the Conservatives gained seats across the country, but Pierre Poilievre lost the seat that he had held for 20 years. As for the NDP, well, they lost their leader and party status. From floor crossings to turbulent trade talks, we've had 3 years' worth of political events. But what came out as the top moment? Let's ask our front bench for their picks. Plus, we've got them. We're going to give us their hot takes for 2026. Sabrina Grover was the federal Liberal candidate in 2021 election. She is a senior advisor at North Star Public Affairs. Melanie Paradis is the former communications director to Aaron O'Toole. She's now the president of Texture Communications. Former interim NDP national director Carl Belanger is here. He's now the president of Traction Strategies, and CTV News national correspondent Rachel Aiello. Welcome to the last Power Play of this year, everyone. Thank you for being here. Sabrina, start with you. What was your standout political moment of 2025?
I mean, going first, it's going to be an easy one for me. I think the rapid turnaround in the Liberal fortunes for the year and their capturing of a fourth mandate here in Canada. I think that Mark Carney coming from what I would say is an underdog positioning at the beginning of the year. I think when you think back to the positioning and the way that we talked about Mark Carney, people talked about him likening him to Michael Ignatieff, where we weren't going to see a success. He wasn't going to come around. Pierre Poilievre was certain to win a majority government. And, just a few months later, not only do we have Mark Carney winning government again, but in the last, month and a half, we've seen 2 floor crossers, putting us just 1 seat shy of a majority. So that has to be a political standout for me for sure.
Melanie, I'm pretty sure this is the first time that Mark Carney has ever been called an underdog in his life, and probably the last time that he wants to hear that. But what was your top political story?
Oh, I mean, Justin Trudeau's resignation itself was a political moment of a decade. But if I have to think about something that's actually going to have an impact well beyond 2025, I actually think it's the NATO 5% commitment that was made this year. I think that it's going to completely refocus the economic attention of many of our provinces. We're already starting to see them move towards attracting more defense industrial companies to come and build up manufacturing in Canada. We clearly have a buyer. It's the Canadian government. They're going to be spending an enormous amount of money in defense. It's really good news for our military. They're getting a pay raise, which they've long deserved. So I think that that's something that is actually going to carry us forward for years to come. And that's why it's an important moment from this year for me.
Carl, what was your top political moment of 2025?
Well, I mean, obviously, Justin Trudeau's resignation changed everything. But the reality is that the biggest impact, I think, was had by Donald Trump and the tariffs. Mm-hmm. That's what changed the political dynamic of the federal politics here. Donald Trump is the one that scared voters in a way, that really polarized the electorate. And I think that's what you saw in 2025. But it's hard to, when you watch all these clips, it's hard to think that this was just this year.
Yeah.
This was all happened this year. It's incredible. It was so spectacular this year. year, and I don't think we'll live this again in 2026. I don't think it will be as spectacular.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we say that now, but then, of course,
knows?
At this time next year, Rachel, you've got the unenviable task of batting cleanup here and trying to pick one that maybe others didn't pick. So what do you think?
Yeah, okay, so I will disappoint in saying I'm not picking one that others didn't, but my big moment was just Trump getting back into office.
Yeah.
Putting Donald Trump back in the White House was the catalyst for so much of the trajectory of our politics this year. It was directly contributing to the discourse, what was happening with the Liberal Party, Justin Trudeau into Mark Carney, the entire elbows up movement that, from the federal government's perspective, seems to have gone away. And then how both the Conservatives and the NDP during the federal election campaign really struggled to find a good counterbalance, a talking point to seize Canadians' attention on it. And I do think it was also a catalyst for some of the key moments we saw from premiers this year. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith going down there. Of course, this entire Alberta-Ottawa MOU kind of born out of this. We need to build up Canada sentiment. And then, of course, all of the various headlines of Doug Ford over the year, pouring out whiskey, going to town on a Chapman's ice cream bar, all of that was directly because of Donald Trump.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, he also swallowed a bee this year, which was another thing that we didn't have on our bingo card there. Okay, Melanie, I'm going to call you out here because you've been bringing it all year. So, as the queen of hot takes, you're going to give us your first hot take for 2026.
Okay, so this one isn't sexy, but I think it's kind of an underdog issue. It's my dark horse for 2026, and that's prison politics. And the reason for that is bail reform has been such an important issue for the past couple of months. We're seeing multiple provinces calling on the federal government to do more in terms of bail reform, and we're seeing the federal government responding with some policies around that and legislation. But what that's going to necessitate is a build out of prisons, because our prisons are already full. Nobody wants to talk about this. Nobody wants to be spending money on this, but all the provinces and the federal government are going to have to do that. And I think in 2026, it's a sleeper issue. We're going to see investments in addiction and mental health treatment facilities and in the prison system.
Instead of orange is the new black, I think we're going to call this prison is the new trade. Sabrina, what's your hot take for 2026?
I think the defining issue of 2026 is going to be First Nations relationships and reconciliation. You already saw some of that groundwork being laid this year. I think we've seen a really turbulent relationship between Canada and a number of First Nations governments, including some of the recent happenings at AFN. And I think it was really a hallmark moment for Mark Carney to say that First Nations chiefs were going to be invited to an FPT meeting in 2026. I think that is remarkable. I think there are also some key pieces of legislation, things like water legislation, that need to move forward, in addition to that big, elephant in the room, which is major projects and how that continues to evolve when with First Nations, not just in BC, but also in the James Bay Ring of Fire region, as well as, of course, in Alberta, when it comes to things like separation and those kinds of things. I think First Nations and the relationship between Canadian governments, premiers and Prime Minister, with First Nation governments across the country is going to be spectacularly important in 2026.
Okay, Rachel, your hot take for 2026?
Katy Perry and Justin Trudeau get engaged? No. I actually think we could see an NDP floor crosser, depending on the way the NDP leadership shakes out, who gets chosen.
Carl's got nothing. He's got okay. Sorry, continue.
No. I was just depending on who is selected as the next leader. Are all of them feeling as rah-rah behind that person? Is there some freeing up of things once Don Davies is no longer interim with his ardent declaration? None of them would cross the floor. I don't know. We'll see.
Carl, top that one.
Well, we'll see. But I think what's going to happen in 2026 that's going to change the dynamic is referendum, baby. Like maybe one, maybe two referendum, because we know what's going to happen in Alberta. But we have the PQ in the lead. We have a Liberal Party in Quebec who imploded. We have the CAQ, which is going nowhere. And so, frankly, Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon is going to enter government in this year. And then we're going to enter the next referendum cycle, something that we haven't seen since 1995.
I hate that you say cycle, because that is as a Quebecer, somebody who grew up in the province, this is
Well, I mean, the
That's
referendum
that
is
thing.
not going to happen this year, but the discussion about the referendum will happen this year. It will be the start. So that's what I mean by cycle, because of course, who knows when he's going to hold it, but it's going to be the beginning of that cycle starting in October.
Right, and we're all supposed to be Team Canada facing the United States.
Yeah, and that conversation as to whether or not one member of the team wants to maybe sit on the sidelines.
Exactly.
That's something. Okay, that's our hot takes and our look back. It is time to grab yourself some eggnog, maybe a little bit of fruitcake if you like it. I personally do. We got to take a quick commercial break. Our panel will be checking their list to see who they think maybe has been naughty or nice in 2025. So who do they think deserves a lump of coal in their stockings? Stay tuned, because Power Play will be right back.
Canada burnt the bridges with America. Donald Trump did not slam the door.
Ben, je suis allé prendre une marche dans la neige ce matin, puis j'ai décidé que je reste.
Notwithstanding clause is part of our Constitution. Sometimes there are a lot of different interests that have to be mediated, and those interests have to be mediated by elected politicians.
The kids have all these ideas about really expensive and practical gifts that are just never going to happen. They've suggested that they enter into an MOU with Santa to be able to achieve what they're hoping for.
'Tis the season of joy and goodwill, but on this show, it's also one of reflection and accountability. Now, let me be honest, not everyone made Santa's nice list this year, at least not according to our front bench panel. We asked them to choose a political figure who they think deserves a lump of coal in their stocking. So, who did they decide on? Let's bring back our front bench. We've got Sabrina Grover, Melanie Paradis, Carl Boulanger, and Rachel Aiello. And you thought I was kidding about the eggnog? We have some in studio, and yes, the Christmas vacation mugs to go with it. And I can tell everybody at home, and especially Joanne Wu, our managing producer, and Richard Gray, our vice president, these are non-alcoholic. I promise you.
Oh, that's the problem.
Yeah, that's your. Sorry, Carl. Sorry. I'd like to stay on air until 2026 at least. Sabrina, tell us who's on your naughty list this year.
To viewers of this show, no surprise, I think. It is Danielle Smith's government and the use of the notwithstanding clause more than once, more than twice, 3 times in a week here in Alberta. I think that, not only does the use of the notwithstanding clause in such a kind of just throwaway, casual approach that this government has taken. It trampled labor rights, it trampled the rights on gender-affirming care, and continues to be just a burden on Albertans. I think that that's going to be a significant issue going into 2026. If I had to guess, that's probably one of the major issues that's going to be at play in Alberta here, because that it's disrespectful of the way that Albertans have engaged, and it was extremely disrespectful to the negotiations with teachers in particular. And I think that Danielle Smith's government has almost no justification for it. They've been trying to work their way into a message box that tries to justify it. It sets the precedent, a dangerous precedent for the rest of the Canadian provinces to potentially use it in the future to trample over rights. And it is a big old lump of coal in my books.
All right, shout out to our graphics department also for bringing it today and helping us with those amazing graphics there. Mel, you're up. Who gets your lump of coal?
I've got a big old tanker full of coal for Premier Eby. The tanker ban is economic self-sabotage. It does nothing to protect those waters. American tankers are floating along the ocean just a few miles from those same waters. They're able to travel back and forth between Alaska and Washington, and yet Canadian tankers cannot. I think that Eby's failure here to anticipate this and meet the moment is going to haunt him in 2026. I think that he's going to have some ghost of Christmas future lingering around him on this tanker ban. They've completely failed to communicate why it's important, and I think that it's just a bad policy.
All right. Carl, it's up to you now. Who do you have on your naughty list?
Well, I'm going to keep with the provincial trend, and I'm going to choose Premier François Legault in Quebec. To think that this guy was, at the height of the pandemic, the most beloved premier in the country. He now has the worst rating of them all. And he just went through a crisis, an healthcare crisis. The doctors have left the province in droves to Ontario, New Brunswick, and elsewhere. And he's lost not one, but two ministers. The ministers of social services left because of Bill 2. And now he backed up the truck, threw his health minister under the bus, and signed a deal with the doctors to prevent them more of them from leaving. So the health minister resigned yesterday. So you look at it any way you want. I mean, he took his walk in the snow, he's staying. But despite everything that's happened, you had, with the Liberal Party, provincial Liberals, over the last month, they imploded. Pablo Rodriguez had to resign.
Yeah.
The CAQ is still in third place. This guy is hanging on too long, and he should know better.
He's taking that walk in the snow, and you wonder if there's other footprints that are going to follow him and make tracks. But who knows at this point? Yeah. Rachel, who do you have?
So I am going to say U.S. Ambassador to Canada, Pete Hoekstra, for his particular brand of diplomacy this year. There was obviously a number of headlines about things he was saying about Canada, clearly not grasping why so many Canadians felt some type of way about the United States this year, not really understanding the boycotts and such. Obviously, there was that altercation with Patterson, as Doug Ford said, cheese slipped off the cracker. And I really think, for me, it was just drawn into sharp contrast when I was thinking back not that long ago about the tenure of our ambassador to the United States, Kirsten Hillman, and what sharp contrast the way she's comported herself is cast when you look at the way Hoekstra has been doing it over the last year here in Canada.
I just want to do a quick round for everybody on how do the people that you picked get on the nice list for next year. Sabrina, start with you. Do you think that there's anything that the Smith government can do to change their fortunes in 2026?
Listen, I think that the Smith government signing of the MOU was a masterclass in political negotiating, and I think that that is an opportunity for her to prove to not just Albertans, but to Canadians that she's actually ready and willing to work with the rest of Canada, and less of a me attitude and more of a this is for us attitude. I think when it comes to Smith's social issues, though, and her engagements on things like the notwithstanding clause, the ripping away of gender affirming care and trampling of rights, I don't see that is going to change in 2026, because I think that's kind of at the root of who that government is and who that government wants to appease to. So we've got some wins on the economy, but I'm not sure that we're going to see those wins on social issues here.
Mel, for Eby, is it as simple as having the conversation, making the explanation and the pitch for why he thinks that the pipeline shouldn't go through, or does he stay on your naughty list if he stands in the way of it no matter what?
I think he needs to come to the table, meet the moment, get creative, find an appropriate place for a carve out to the tanker ban. You don't have to eliminate the entire policy. If you can find a workable solution where some of it still gets to stay, but we can still get a pipeline to Tidewater, there's got to be a way. When there's a will, when there's political will, there is a way, and he's got to find the political will in 2026.
Carl, is it like the Motley Crue song, Don't Go Away Mad, Just Go Away? Is that how François would go?
Yeah, Legault's got to go. As simple as that. And if he goes, then he might give a fighting chance to his party to come back. If he doesn't go, things are not going to turn around. He's tried everything. It's not working. Politicians sometimes, they need to understand that they're done. They're done. The voters don't listen to them. So, François Legault should go. And who knows? Maybe there is a Marcel Charnier who could take over like Mark Carney did at the federal level, who could become the voice to reestablish a Coalition Avenir Québec.
Yeah, I love the deep cuts that you're dropping here on this. For Hoekstra, what do you think he needs to do in 2026?
I think it will be, frankly, a bit easier of a job for him in 2026 because the core focus is going to be on the CUSMA renegotiation. Obviously, that's going to have some tense moments, but what we saw over the last year was a series of moving targets. It was, we're going to get a deal by this state. We're really focused in on this sector or that sector, and he seemed at odds at times with Donald Trump. I think where he might be able to find success next year is if the United States comes out with that clear message, kind of holds true to that Greer wish list of things they want Canada to address, like supply management. Maybe there are ways for him to have those conversations to better take back Canada's message to the United States and genuinely seem like he's listening to Canadians.
Yeah, and I don't know if he's a hugger. I don't know him. But if you want to hug it out with David Patterson, I think, people would probably be open to that. Not that I think we're going to see that as a photo op, but hey, maybe I'm too deep into the eggnog. time for a commercial break. Don't forget, this show is all about accountability and holding people's feet to the fire, but that doesn't mean we can't end on a nice note, right? So when we return, we're going to be handing out some gifts to political figures who landed on the nice list this year. Our mugs are full of cheer, and yeah, maybe we need a bit more of a refill on the eggnog, but we're going to be right back, right after this.
I cannot be the one to carry the Liberal standard into the next election.
I feel a little bit more confident and optimistic, particularly as it relates to the new Prime Minister engaging with President Trump.
I think it's important that we have someone in place that is going to be here through the conclusion of those discussions.
President Trump's damaging tariffs go completely against Mr. Reagan's legacy.
Oh, a little amuse-bouche of the moments that our panel thought brought some tidings, some comfort and joy to this political year. Now, in our last segment, our panel of Grinches handed out some coal. But during the commercial break, their hearts grew 3 sizes. So now they're ready to give out some gifts, everybody. So let's lean into that holiday spirit and bring back our jolly bunch of elves. Sabrina Grover, Melanie Paradis, Carl Boulanger, and Rachel Aiello. Sabrina, who gets your gift of the year?
Mike, I just want to say that really warmed my growing heart. I feel so ready for holidays now.
Right?
I think it would be, a missed opportunity this year and over the last 5 to not recognize Ambassador Hillman. I think that not only was she Canada's first female ambassador to the United States, taking that post on in 2020, which, if you can think back, is probably when our unprecedented times really started, and have not stopped in the last 5 years. Ambassador Hillman's quiet diplomacy and steady hand really, I think, reassured not only Canadians on this side of the border, but I think really built those long-lasting, strong relationships in the United States that, we don't always see every day in the news, and we often feel like that might not be the case. But I think that you don't have this relationship with the United States that lasts as long as it does without incredible people representing Canada in Washington like Ambassador Hillman. Of course, there's numerous accomplishments that she's had from negotiating CUSMA 1 to negotiating CPTPP. It's a lot of letters, but another trade agreement that we had. And I think that she'll be well remembered and well recognized for that diplomacy long after her departure.
Mel, you're up. Put a bow on yours.
Well, every year that we do a segment like this, I usually pick a conservative politician. But this year, the Christmas spirit has gotten to me, and I'm extending my gift across the floor to Premier Wab Kinew. We obviously don't agree on everything, but his willingness to govern and not posture this year has really been quite impressive. He's increasingly tough on crime and most recently cracking down on drug trafficking in the province. He also seems to be putting public safety on the table and has been pressuring Ottawa on bail reform alongside Premier Ford. He's also been a proven ally to Ford, both on major projects and supporting his ad campaign in the United States when Ford came under pressure. Premier Kinew was in his corner. And finally, on the Port of Churchill, that project that he's pushing to advance through major projects is going to require an enormous amount of infrastructure investment. And if he's successful in executing on that, it's going to mean generational economic change for the province of Manitoba. And so for all those reasons, he gets my gift this year.
And Carl, I apologize for calling you a Grinch when you're clearly more of a Griswold.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, I know, because you nearly choked on your eggnog there, and I apologize.
Yeah, it's the quality of it.
But who gets your gift?
It's California Governor Gavin Newsom. I don't think there's a politician more fun to watch this year than Gavin Newsom. The guy is taking strong stance against Donald Trump. He's fighting back against Donald Trump. He's making fun of Donald Trump, using his tactics. I mean, his social accounts hilarious, just using the same kind of rhetoric, but from the left side of the spectrum. And also on the policy front, fighting back, fighting back and putting it in. So, I'm not saying he's the best governor in the history of California. I'm not saying that, but that's what I heard.
Sorry,
That's what they say.
Sorry, I don't know if this is an Arnold Schwarzenegger imitation
This is my
or
problem.
a Donald
If
Trump.
my Austrian comes out.
Yeah, okay. So, sorry. I just need everybody to understand for a moment. That does not have any alcohol in it. Again, I've watched it being poured, whichever camera we're on here, I watched it being poured. There is no alcohol in there. He's just bad at imitations,
Listen,
I think. Okay,
it's
go
not
ahead.
what I heard.
Sorry.
It's not what I say.
Yeah.
It's what they say.
Oh, my gosh.
Gavin Newsom.
Rachel,
My pick.
save us, Rachel, please.
Okay, so Justin Trudeau is getting my gift this year for resigning and doing it when he did. At the time, I think there was a lot of discourse over the holidays last year, wondering, like, will he, won't he, preparing our political look-backs and such. And at the time, the thought was, well, if he does it now, it's still too late.
Yeah.
But clearly, he was just in time. Getting out when he did has shifted his party from being in save the furniture, shuffling chairs on the Titanic deck situation to now being one seat shy of a majority government. And I think over time, his departure and getting out and giving the Liberals the chance to kind of refresh with Mark Carney potentially could be a playbook the Conservatives could be looking at as an option for them in the year or so ahead, potentially. And obviously, Santa has been looking down kindly on Justin Trudeau for this because he is now set to have a joyous pop star-filled holiday season, and I love that for him. It's a great post-politics reward, I guess, for the many years of probably a lot of hard work, not so fun. Obviously, some great moments, but a tough end.
Yeah, Justin Trudeau helping the Liberals to finally win a majority in 2026 is not what anybody thought, I think. Circling back, Sabrina on Hillman, how much is she going to be missed, and what does her successor need to take from what she's done into this job?
I think that one of the things that I find really remarkable about Ambassador Hillman, especially in contrast to Ambassador Hoekstra, is that she was kind of on the quieter side, right? Like, she's not in the news for making splashy comments or being offensive or pushing the boundaries. She's actually doing the diplomatic work. And I think that that's an important piece to keep in mind for whomever comes next. I think, obviously Mark Wiseman's name has been thrown around a lot, and I think it brings a lot of connections and a lot of ins into the communities and the people and the rooms that Donald Trump is often in, or the other folks around him are in. And I think that that's important to have that network and have those connections. But I think the quiet diplomacy, the steady hand, the behind-the-scenes work is what's really important. I think that's what's going to be most missed about Ambassador Hillman.
Mel, what could other premiers learn from what Premier Carney is doing going forward, do you think?
I actually think that the biggest learning is for the candidates for NDP leadership. At the federal level, whoever becomes the next leader of the federal NDP should be taking some notes from Wab Kinew and his successes and how he is really focused on affordability, focused on issues that matter to people at their kitchen tables, and talking about those issues as opposed to some of the things that we've seen the NDP pushing for over the past year. I think that the opportunity for the next federal leader of the NDP to learn things from Wab Kinew is the biggest in 2026.
Carl, if you can refrain from any imitation and impression, I would really appreciate this. But do you think Gavin Newsom in 2026 is going to be starting to lay that groundwork for the presidential run?
I think he will certainly consider it, and I think a lot of people will ask him to do so. And I think that's good news for Canada because I think he's a great ally to Canada. He's been throughout this commercial dispute with the Trump administration. And so a lot of people are looking forward to that. Now, are his tactics replicating Trump going to help him or hurt him? I don't know. But it's sure fun to watch. Thank you for your attention to this matter.
Because that's how he ends all of his tweets now, which is hilarious and insane at the same time. It's hard to sort of go back to Justin Trudeau and ask, like, what's going to come, what comes of this. But to the point that you made, Rachel, on how, like, his stepping away really sort of did pave the way for the Liberals to try and sort of reform themselves. If Poilievre does, and we don't know that he will, but do you think a pivot moment is in the future for the Conservatives given where they are right now, and I know there's a lot of questions as to whether or not Poilievre can pivot, but how important is that and that kind of lesson for the Conservatives in 2026?
I definitely think there will be pivot opportunities. And even what we saw with the early rollout of Mark Carney, it wasn't the version of Mark Carney we saw near the tail end of the campaign and into the early part of his time as Prime Minister. Like, it was a bit of a shaky start. So it is possible for the Conservatives, if they want to take a page out of Justin Trudeau's playbook and go that route of bringing in some fresh face, arguably from outside of the party currently, they would be able to do so. But I do think it's going to hinge on a few things. One, are there more floor crossers? Obviously, that will weaken Poilievre's leadership positioning. Two, what percentage does he get in his leadership review? Three, what goes on with the Trump administration, CUSMA renegotiations? What does that shape up to be? Is there another argument that the Conservatives can latch on to try to re-win the argument that Mark Carney's lost his elbows? Is there a new sentiment there? So it's going to be a fascinating dynamic to watch heading into next year. But I do think it'll be interesting to see the way the Conservatives go, and if it is a moment where they think that Poilievre can double down and get it back. You know, it's too early to say. But yeah, I didn't perceive the way it has gone with Mark Carney turning around quite quickly the way it did. So obviously, if 2025 taught us anything about politics, anything can happen. Be prepared for a lot of surprises.
Yeah, and certainly don't count your lead pool before it's hatched. Thank you so much for our Friday front bench. There they are, Sabrina Grover, Melanie Paradis, Carl Boulanger, and Rachel Aiello. Special thank you to you guys. You come out every Friday. It's always a blast for me. I hope you're enjoying it as much. And we'll see you all in 2026. Really appreciate it. All right, stick around. We've got one more break on Power Play. We'll be right back after this. So before we leave you tonight on this last Power Play of 2025, we wanted to thank some of the people that you don't see who are so key in putting this show together. Producers Rachel Swatek-Tsang, Samantha Pope, Stephanie Ha, and Noah Wachter. Our bureau manager, Joanne Wu, who is a champion of this team and a driving force within our office. There's also an incredibly fantastic talented team of technicians who help us get us on air in Toronto, but also here in Ottawa. The names that you don't hear, especially behind the cameras here: Carlo, Marley, Brian, Ryan, Jeff M, Jeff D, Buntola, Scott P, Scott R, Robin, Peter, and Ian. I have the distinct pleasure of working with them every day and appreciate everything they do. Lastly, we'd like to thank you, our viewers. We wouldn't be here without you, and we appreciate you tuning in each and every night. We wish you all the best for the holiday season. Hope that you get to spend some time with your families, and tell you that this does it for Power Play for 2025. We guarantee that we will be back here in the new year. Make sure that you stay tuned, because your top headlines are just ahead on CTV News Channel. Good night, everyone.